If you're going to make plans with me, I'm like, okay, what time do we need to be there? Where are we going? What do I need to bring? Like, I'm just that type of person. Anal retentive, whatever you want to call me, that's me. But I've learned that you can't always be that way. And it's really been a struggle for me.
Hi, welcome back to Let Me Ask You Something, a weekly podcast where I, MD Pittman, ask everyday people about something extraordinary that happened in their lives. Now, this week on episode 3, we talked to Hula Ramos. He has something in common with 10 million other Americans. He lost his job during the pandemic. Now, we talk about that and how he had to go on unemployment temporarily and how he's transitioned from a career in radio to what he's doing today. It's a pretty interesting story.
So, this is episode 3 of Let Me Ask You Something. My guest, Hula Ramos. He is a California native, San Diego, and he has something in common with about 10 million people around the country. He lost his job during the pandemic. So, Hula, let me ask you something. What's it like to lose your job during a pandemic?
It's crazy, Mike. The fact that, I had been doing something for over 19 years, and so used to doing it. And I mean, early on, I was in the radio career, the radio business, and I watched it slowly start to change in the sense of with all of these apps coming into play and podcasting coming into play. I slowly saw the radio business. It used to be big personalities, and you got paid a lot of money, and you'd be on in the mornings, and you're like, "Hey, good morning, what's up? How are you doing?" And you talk like this, and you're like, "Welcome to Channel 933." I watched it slowly change to where it became very corporate and it became very not so organic. But you went with it. You went with the flow, and then the pandemic hit. And when you find out that you lose your job that you have been doing for over 19 years, it's devastating.
Yeah.
I mean, I was crushed. I had gone to school to do this, did it for so long, had built up a reputation in my city, and to have it all go away was crushing. And then the fact that not only that, with radio people, if you lose your job in the city that you work in, you have a brand and you have a name, and you're able to move to another radio station, fairly easily. Well, with this pandemic, radio stations weren't hiring.
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing. And you don't want to move cross country because they didn't know who you were. Yeah. So it was hard. It was really, really hard and tough for me because it's like, oh, wow, I have to start all over again.
And it's tough with you because you're a family man, wife, 2 kids.
Right. I have an 8-year-old, a 7-year-old now, and my 7-year-old has an intellectual disability. So there's things that she needs, which costs a lot of money, and I have a mortgage and I have bills, just like everybody else. And for me to just not have a solid foundation or a way to pay for everything just scared me.
So what did you do? What'd you do?
Well, first of all, I kind of, I sat back and tried to reach out to other radio stations. That wasn't a thing. Mm-hmm. I was on unemployment for a good 6 months. And after a while of nobody returning my messages or people not really knowing what to do because of this pandemic, I ended up just going for any freaking job that would roll across my, email, whether it was bussing tables, whether it was, just anything that I felt that I had the skills for. And finally, I ended up with a job that in hospitality at a resort, and it was in sales. And I learned really quickly that I am not a good salesperson.
Well, you got the personality for it.
Well, yeah, you would think, but you would think, and not to knock down any salespeople whatsoever. But like my goal with helping people is not to really I don't care if people buy something from me. Like that wasn't, and salespeople, that's your end goal. You make commission off of what people buy. For me, it was like I was just making sure the customer was always happy.
Yeah.
So whether, for me to go, hey, do you want to be a part of this? And they go, no, I'm like, okay, cool. Where salespeople are very much like, but I think this is going to be great for you. You need to, you need to sign up for this. And they won't take no for an answer. And for me, you said, like, if you hesitated and said no, I'd be like, okay, cool. We're done. We're done talking.
Okay, cool. See you later. Have a nice day. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's not a salesperson.
No, I learned quickly that I have a personality for sure, but I
Yeah.
don't have the ability to take no for an answer.
Okay.
Like no's, So they eventually moved me to a more customer service based position. And I'm thriving. Like I'm doing well. It's still, I'm barely scraping by. I'm barely paying the bills, but it's something.
Yeah. Now you've also started this podcast that you Life with Hula,
Right.
daily podcast.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
So, why did you start that?
Well, being in the radio business for so long, I'm a creative person. So I'm constantly like thinking of stories and just thinking of like wacky things in my head. And I feel like I have a wacky life and I love sharing stories with people. And when you do it for so long and then you stop sharing these stories with people, it's weird. My brain is constantly going and I have no way to release it or, let it out. So somebody had mentioned like, you know what, since the radio thing's not a thing anymore for you, why don't you start a podcast? And what you're basically doing is just sharing your life with anyone who would listen. So I started my first episode and it was me babbling about the fact that I lost my job and didn't have a flow, was just really allowing myself to be creative, but also allowing myself to just release all of this tension I had and stress I had in my life. And then as I progressed and continually did it every day, it became easier and easier.
Yeah.
And it was just like being in the radio business, being able to share. And actually it was a lot more because in radio, you can't curse. You can't really, you have to toe the line a lot of times. And, you have to watch out for maybe sponsors or corporate stuff like that. With being, on a podcast, it's you, real, authentic, genuine, and you can, say or do whatever you want.
It's like a reality show podcast in a way.
Pretty much. I mean, well, the reality shows, let's be honest, a lot of things are staged.
Yes.
But, I learned in the radio business the art of teasing things, like, giving the enticement, like, oh, I lost how much weight? How much weight did I lose? We'll find out by clicking this link. So I learned that whole thing. But yeah, it is definitely a reality show because I share everything. I don't hold anything back. On the radio side, you do have to, you don't want to get too controversial sometimes if you're not in that type of format. Like if you're in news radio, different story. But if you're not, you don't want to talk that much about politics. But I can freely talk about politics on my podcast. I've talked about on the radio program that I was on about when I was molested as a child. Very like towing that line because kids are listening. On my podcast, I let it all out. I let all the details out. So it's kind of a, you kind of have that more freedom, I guess, so to speak.
So would you ever have thought of doing a podcast if you didn't lose your job?
No. Not even. I always thought like people who did podcasts were like people who had opinions about, like strong opinions about things.
Yeah.
I always thought podcasts were like for people who really were into crime investigation, storytelling, stuff like that. Like really hardcore.
Like Serial. Podcast Serial. Yeah.
Yeah. Like hardcore stuff. I never thought that people would listen to me and hear my stories of me being mad because I couldn't find the brand of cereal that I was looking for at the grocery store.
But you're relating to people. That's what people relate to because they can't find the same brand of cereal.
Exactly. But I never thought that would be an interesting thing for a podcast. And I'm slowly learning now that, after doing it for almost close to a year, that people do care about that kind of stuff. And it's cool.
Now, it's pretty successful. So tell everybody where you rank on the top, the Hot 50?
Yeah. So there's this, thank you. There's this podcastmagazine.com. It's an online podcasting magazine that showcases podcasts from around the country. and people can vote for your favorite podcast.
Mhm.
It's a voting system. And so there's the Hot 50 list they put out each month. Well, as of April 2021, I'm now ranked number 8
Okay,
on
yeah.
this
And
list.
you fluctuated between like 11 and 7 over the last few
Right.
months. Yeah.
I'm just happy to be on this list, to be honest with you. Like, I like to be, there's some amazing podcasts that are on this list. And for me to be even associated with them is cool. Like I said, I didn't think anybody would care to listen to some guy in San Diego talking about, the type of, his weight loss journey. Like, I
Yeah.
just didn't think that was a thing.
Yeah. Some 40-something-year-old in San
Right.
Diego.
Right. Right.
Jobless San Diegoan.
Exactly, because on the radio, when you're like a morning show personality, you can talk about, oh, we're here at Balboa Park, or hey, the San Diego Zoo. You talk about local stuff, and then people in your city listen. Now, I mean, I was starting my podcast just like that, like, hey,
Yeah.
here in San Diego, blah 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 blah. But then as I got more involved with like TikTok and social media, and realized, oh, there's a whole new world out there.
Yeah.
I had to become more generic and more, broad spectrum, and pick stories that focused on things that happened that other people outside of San Diego can relate to. And it's been a challenge, a great challenge.
Yeah.
But it's been interesting to say the least.
Now we've met. I mean, TikTok's exploded since you brought that up, and that's
Right.
how we've met. We met on TikTok.
Correct.
So how has that app helped you during? And we're not sponsored by TikTok unless they want to sponsor us.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
how has that app helped you? How's that app helped you during this pandemic? And as you said, to help you get some material for your podcast.
Absolutely. The beauty of it, because as you know, a lot of people always think it's a dancing app. That's kind of how it first comes up when you hear TikTok. Oh, it's a young kids dancing app.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I slowly got on there, like I started doing that. Like, growing up in San
Yeah.
Diego, I was like this hip hop kid who like was in these dance troops. And I was like, I can be a 40-year-old dancing guy.
And you got some
And
moves. You got some
I
moves.
I try. Thank you. Thank you. And so as I started getting into the communities, the younger kids were like, you're an old guy. Like, I don't want to see you do this. And I started floating into like what I call adult dad TikTok, where
Yeah.
all these dads were showing relatable, material, and it helped me to stay creative, because I'm such a creative person,
Yeah.
and it allowed me to think like, what would be my twist on this skit that somebody did,
Yeah.
or gas prices are high. What would be my take on sharing that and how I'm feeling on this app? And that's kind of
Yeah.
how I see TikTok as a way to just keep myself creative. And it's really helped me as far as like, because I was so depressed for so long,
Yeah.
and not having that creative outlet, that it allowed me to have that creative outlet and be more happy again. And it just helped me to, reach out to more people, meet people like you that I
Yeah.
would never have ever met
No,
before.
never ever.
Yeah, yeah. This app is really like, it's all about community, as it's very cliche, but it is about community, about meeting new people, and it's cool. Yeah.
So, with this, with the podcast, you've grown from just one. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing in other podcasts and how many podcasts are you involved in?
Okay, so I'm in 3. And so I originally started life with Hula, and to be honest with you, it, like I said, it was a creative outlet, but also it was really about a weight loss journey. So
Mm-hmm.
last year around this time, I was 294 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed when I was on the radio, weight loss, like people want to know about weight and how can you lose it. And
Yeah.
so I started the podcast mainly talking about going on a weight loss journey.
Yeah.
And that kind of helped grow my audience. And so
And
then,
it's
like
just real,
with
real
Hula,
quick, real quick. Talk
yeah,
about what you do for your weight loss here, because this is I just thought about it and I was like, that's overwhelming for me. Can you talk a little bit about what you do during these intermittent fasts?
correct. Yeah. So that was like that became a hot new trend. It seemed last year, at the beginning of last year. And so here's the thing. I'm Catholic and I observe Lent, and during that time you give up something. Well, during that time I thought, well, why don't I just, you know, give up on snacks, sweets, all that stuff, and just go on a fast.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I did is with the intermittent fast, you have eating windows. So my eating window is 18 and 6. So for 18 hours a day, I do not eat or drink. For 6 hours a day, that's when I'm able to eat or drink. So I eat starting at 12 at lunchtime, noon.
Yeah.
And then I eat again at 5:30. So I have 2 meals. And within those 2 meals, I have about 700 to 900 calories total in a day.
Total.
Total.
Whoa.
So my caloric intake is lowered. And I only really eat like say at 12, I eat 6 ounces of fruit, 6 ounces of protein, and 8 ounces of veggies, and then I do it again at dinner time. So within 40 days, I am literally eating 700 to 900 calories a day for 40 days, and I have watched my weight drop tremendously.
Yes. I mean, I've seen it from on the TikTok app. I mean, I scrolled back to your beginning of that journey, and yeah, it is dramatic. If you haven't seen this, it's actually Hulu. Send me some pictures, and I'll put them up on my um, website, and because I'm going to have a photo gallery of some of the guests if they have
Yes.
photos that are applicable. So I'll put some of those up if you send me a few.
Awesome. I
Um,
will. Thank you.
yeah. So what are you doing now? I guess are you doing all right though well, actually let me go back because we want to sidetrack here. Talk
Oh,
about
yeah.
the other podcast that you're in.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So as I was doing Life with Hula, which is about my life, I realized that well, I didn't realize this. I've already known this about myself. I'm a humongous Disney like freak, fan, stan, whatever word you want to use. I just love everything Disney. Doesn't matter what it is. So a friend of mine is also a big fan of Disney. And so we thought, you know what? Let's just do a podcast. We're here at home. Everybody's doing podcasts. Let's just do it. And so I have a podcast called Leader of the Club. It's once a week. We talk about everything Disney. Thank goodness for Disney Plus, and thank
Yeah.
goodness for WandaVision for coming out because that helped launch this podcast. And
Okay.
we just talk about everything Disney.
Yeah.
So I have that once a week. And then as I was doing this other podcast, a group of friends of mine that I used to do charitable work with, it's an Asian group, Asian community here in San Diego. They reached out to me, the Asian Culture Media Alliance, and they said, "Hey, you like to talk and you're really all about podcasting. Help us launch a podcast where we talk about Asian American and Pacific Islander topics that you're probably too afraid to talk to your parents about. Because in the Asian American community, Pacific Islander community, you don't talk about your weight. You
Mm-hmm.
don't talk about, what they call dirty laundry. Even, to some people, it may not be dirty laundry. You just don't talk about things in general.
Mm-hmm.
And so I am a part of this podcast called Asian Voices Radio Podcast. It comes out once a week, comes out on Tuesdays, where we talk about those topics like transgender people. We talked about sex trafficking. We talk about, Asians dealing with Asian hate right now with the whole Stop Asian Hate, campaign that's going on. So we just talk about things that a lot of my culture would not ever touch. And that is it's a really cool podcast because it challenges me to be more serious. I'm always such a jovial, happy-go-lucky, like I love to laugh kind of guy, but it's taught me to kind of tone that down a little bit and bring up topics that I might be afraid to bring up.
As I've heard you say more than one time, you're a hugger.
I am a hugger. Yes, I love hugging, and that's going to be hard. I mean, I'm partially vaccinated right now. My second dose is coming this week.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited to be able to hug those that want to hug again. I mean, with consent, everything's consensual.
Consensual hugging.
Yeah, consensual hugs. But yes, I am a hugger.
All right. So, with these podcasts, how beneficial is it for you? I guess talk a little bit about how when you started these podcasts, your state of mind, your mentality, and how have they transformed you?
It's funny. It's allowed me to be a lot more open. I mean, I was open as it was in the radio, industry, but you are guarded by a lot of things. You become. It's funny because everybody says, "Oh, you're a local celebrity. You're a local celebrity." I'm not. I don't ever feel that way. I'm some kid who grew up in San Diego, and luckily enough got to be on the radio in the city that I live in and I love.
Yeah.
And there was some sort of notoriety, especially with social media coming into play. When I started in the radio business, MySpace was a thing. Then it was like Friendster, and then it was Facebook. And so people got to see in YouTube, and people got to see your face. And so, I would go to the grocery store and people would like see you and go, "Hey, I know who
Hey,
you
I
are."
know you.
Yeah. And during my single years, because I was such a late bloomer with things, like I was always like, I don't know. I started drinking when I was a lot older. Not when I was younger. I was really much the good kid growing up.
Yeah.
And so when I got into the radio business and people started recognizing me, it was like, whoa, this is cool. Like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm going to be big time. And so with podcasting, it's kind of helped me become more of me and who
Yeah.
I am, and realize the type of person that I want to portray myself to be. So that's kind of how podcasting has helped me as a person, and helped me, I guess become more of me,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I for a lot of people who may not know, I'm a reporter. I work at a daily
Right.
newspaper in Southwest Ohio. I kind of got that celebrity feeling
Right.
before, like somebody told me I was a local celebrity. I was like, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
Just write for the
Yep.
local newspaper. No one knows what I look like.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So, but when they hear my name, it's like, you sound from. Why do I know your name? I was like, work for the paper. So,
Right, exactly. No, it's funny is during the height of being in the radio business, like I would say like, "Oh, I'm on the radio," and I would talk about weight loss journey because that was a hot topic. I would go to a fast food restaurant and I'd be like, "Hey, can I, are you ready to order?" I'm like, "Yeah, can I have a Big Mac combo with blah blah blah?" Hey, wait a minute. You
I
sound
know that.
familiar. And you're like, "No." Just so you know that meal is not for me. Or like people would go, "I know your voice from somewhere. Where do I know it from?" And I would always tiptoe around it. "Oh, did we go to high school together? Oh, I don't know. A lot of people say that I have a familiar voice." And so that's kind of how I would go around it. And I would force people to kind of quote unquote out me as the guy from the radio versus me saying, "Oh, you know me. I'm that guy from the radio
Yeah.
station. Do you listen
Yeah.
to that station?" Like that's kind of how I played it.
You weren't Sam on the Falcon and the Winter Soldier when he was trying to in that first episode where he was like, "Come on, you know who I
Right,
am."
right, right, right. No, never. No, because back then, back then, like that's why with radio people, that's why you had like Jumpin' Jack Flash, or you had like a lot of women, especially women, they would change their last
Alias. Yep.
name. They'd have their aliases. And like in media, you have an alias because you don't want people to Google search you. I mean, that wasn't a thing back. I mean, we're both old. So like back in the day, you didn't really Google search people, but now you can.
Yeah.
And so the alias is a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, are you going to get back in radio? I mean, is that something that's in your near to distant future?
In all honesty, I would love to if given the opportunity. I don't think that's going to be a thing in the near future. Because I just feel like a lot of radio, because now with the pandemic, they realize that you don't need a big staff. You don't need morning show personalities anymore. You can have one person on the air and do stuff, just like this is in general with other jobs too. You're seeing that people can do multiple.
Yeah, in my world too. I mean, we're doing less with or more with less. I mean, that's kind of a cliche phrase nowadays, but it doesn't make it any less true.
Right.
We are doing a lot more with a lot less people.
Exactly. And so I feel like I like dipping. I mean, luckily for me, I was able to be a jack of all trades, a master of none with the radio thing. I was, dabbled here and there with different things. I would love, like I said, if the opportunity came, yes, put me back on the radio. I'd love it. But I don't have high hopes for that.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
So what is next? I mean, is podcasting something? I mean, I know some people can make money on podcasting, but is this something that is a viable solution for you, or is it just something that supplements whatever you do?
I think this right now is something I'm supplementing, something I supplement with what I'm actually doing. Luckily enough, the podcast has gained traction. Last year I got an endorsement to endorse the census when the census was out. I talked
Oh,
about it on my podcast a lot, and I got paid to do that, which I
yeah.
never thought was a thing. The same company reached out to me again to talk about our electric company here in San Diego, and promote that. So it's definitely extra income. It's not paying the bills,
Hmm.
but I definitely see it as a supplement. I'm very much a creative, like I said. So I have been throwing my hat into like theme parks. I've done theme parks before. We have a couple theme parks here in San Diego. I've reached out to them. Hey, I'm available, blah, blah, blah. Marketing, something that I really have gotten into with social media, especially. I feel
Yeah.
like I'm really gotten into social media and I know and understand it. But it's weird though, because, just like they say, they always want the young people, because you can mold them and stuff like that. I may look young, but I'm not. So it's been harder, but we'll see. I
Yeah.
don't, with the pandemic, I used to be a planner, but because of the pandemic, I've learned that you can't really plan as
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, it can go all to hell in a handbasket very quickly.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's kind of the thing. Yeah. Yeah.
So one thing I always ask people, I may or may not use this in a story when I ask this, but I always try to ask it because it might lead to something interesting. But what's something that you've learned, not necessarily about yourself, but over the course of this past year, with losing your job, starting this podcast, getting a new job, going to these other podcasts, what is something that you've learned that it really hits home to you?
It's actually something what I just said, to be honest with you. So here's the thing. I'm a perfectionist in general. I always plan things ahead of time. If you're going to make plans with me, I'm like, okay, what time do we need to be there? Where are we going? What do I need to bring? Like, I'm just that type of person. Anal retentive, whatever you want to call me, that's me. But I've learned that you can't always be that way. And it's
Yeah.
really been a struggle for me. It's really been tough because things I have to go with the flow a lot of times. And I may want to do one thing, but it's going to change. And so I think that's what this career thing is the biggest thing for me. It's like, I always want to be creative, but what if I'm not? What if I end up with a job that's not creative? Well, it's taught me that I really have to stay focused on. Well, the thing is let me backtrack. So, being this perfectionist person that I've become, I've realized that I put work as like the most important thing on the forefront.
Mhm.
And now being in this pandemic, excuse me, family has become like a big thing. And so I realized that I have to go with the flow, be more attentive to my family, be more attentive to my kids, you know, maybe end up going to a job where it's not really a career, it's a job. It's something that pays the bills, and focus more on my family, and be that dad for my kids. And, as my youngest one who has that intellectual disability is growing up, she's going to face a lot more challenges. So be there for her. So
Mhm.
that's kind of like something I'm learning more about myself, that maybe work and career isn't something I should focus on. It should be more of the family thing.
Now, another thing I always ask is what advice would you give? Is that what you've learned? Is that the advice you would give to somebody in this situation, or is there something else that you would also give?
I mean, I always tell people in general, is when it comes, because whenever I do like career fair talks, or just I just always believe you need to be open. You need to be more open because people can't read your mind. And so that's kind of like the biggest thing that I push for people, but also, yeah, the family thing. I mean, I've learned that your job does not define who you are. Your career doesn't define who you are. It's just a part of you. It's really all about you being as open as possible, you being as accepting of things that happen as possible. It's kind of, that's the advice I'd give to people, is like, don't be defined by social media. Don't be defined by your job. Be defined by like who you really are.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's a good way to end this here. We are, about 35 minutes or so into this podcast, and it's about the average of what I want to get to because attention spans are short sometimes.
Of course,
But
absolutely.
anything else you'd like to say in closing about what you've done over the last year, about losing your job, which is I can only imagine losing my job because that would be devastating because that's all I know is what
Right,
I've done for
right.
the past 22 years.
Right, right. You know, and like I say, I just feel that there's a lot more important things than a job. And it's going to be hard. I mean, with a lot of people, you obviously they always say do something you love, and maybe if you do something you love and it doesn't make that much money, it's cool because you love it. Of course you have to pay your bills and all that kind of good stuff, but I've just learned through this pandemic that it's gonna get better. Everybody says it, and it's so cliche, and I keep trying to blink my eyes faster because I want it to go be better, but I know in my heart of hearts it's gonna be better. Whether it takes me a year, two, five, it's eventually gonna get better for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, great. Well, Hula Ramos, thank you very much for on my third episode of Let Me Ask You Something, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you having me on your podcast.